Okay, here we are. This is Sunday afternoon, and we are going to wrap up most of this emotional wellness through yoga with a topic on fascia, working with the fascia. So, what is fascia? Fascia is a a continuous three-dimensional web of connective tissue that wraps, supports, and integrates every structure in the body. That's the muscles, that's around the organs, nerves, bones, joints, and even the cells themselves. It is elastic and fluid, and it's designed to glide and adapt. So it's rich. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? So it's like if okay, I don't want to talk about chicken, but that's one of the best examples of it when you're going to cook a chicken and they've got that sheath around it. But it's rich in our sensory nerve endings, and it makes a major making it a major organ of perception. So not only is this fiber wrapped around all our organs, bones, cells, everything in our body, but it's an organ of perception. So it has a lot of communication happening in that throughout the fascia. It's responsive and it constantly reshapes itself based on our movement, our breath, our posture, stress, and emotion. So it's interconnected, functioning as one of the unified systems rather than separate parts. Fascia research now describes fascia not as a passive tissue in the body, but as a dynamic communication system. So it's a living network that carries information, sensation, and emotion throughout our system. So fascia is deeply tied to emotional wellness because it responds to stress, trauma, fear, inflammation, posture, breath patterns, nervous system states. So I'll say that again. Fascia is deeply tied to emotional wellness because it responds to stress, trauma, fear, inflammation, posture, breath patterns, and nervous system states. So when the body enters through survival mode, the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, fascia tightens, it thickens, and it loses its fluidity. This creates in our physical bodies bracing patterns, restricted breath, reduced mobility, and a sense of being stuck both physically and emotionally. So emotions are not processed or expressed. The emotions that are not processed or expressed often imprint into fascial patterns, and this is why somatic work can release the old feelings long after the original experience. Do y'all need any repeating over what I just said? How many of you knew this about fascia, the communication pathway, and how it responds to, right? So it responds to our inflammation. And what do we talk about the gut? You know, so how all of this ties into emotional health. When we look at the polyvagal theory, fascia as a nervous system messenger. So, according to polyvagal theory, the nervous system constantly scans for danger through neuroception, and fascia is what plays a key role. It contains high concentration of interoceptive nerve endings. So, there's an internal sensing, and that is in the fascia. It tightens in states of threat and it softens in states of safety. It communicates mechanical and emotional tension back to the brain. It influences our breath, posture, tone of voice, and overall regulation. So, in survival states, which would be the sympathetic or dorsal states, fascia becomes dense, dry, rigid. Movement can feel limited. Emotions feel overwhelming or even shut down. And the body tries to protect rather than express. In safe and regulated states, which is the ventral vagal state, fascia becomes supple and hydrated. Movement feels spacious. Breath expands, and emotional energy can move and release. So fascia is therefore both shaped by and shaping our nervous system states. Not done yet, but I'd like for somebody to tell me what I just told you. Because this is important, and this is how yoga and emotional wellness come together. This is a huge piece of information that we need to understand.
Yeah, you just stated that the fascia directly correlates and responds to our nervous system and whether it's in sympathetic or parasympathetic, um, whether it's activated or not. So if it's sympathetic, then it hardens, it becomes dense, and that's when like everything your body wants to protect itself. Whereas the inverse of that is if you're feeling safe and you're tapped into your parasympathetic nervous system, then your fascia is also responding to that, and it's like smoother, it's gliding, it's softer, and it's more hydrated.
Absolutely. Well said. Perfect. Because this matters in our yoga poses. So when we're doing our yoga practice and we're doing if we're doing a fast flow, would we notice this? Would we notice as much restriction or mobility, right? So when we move slowly and we are moving in and out of the poses with consciousness and awareness, and we're spending a little time there, then we can notice where there's patterns of restrictions or space. And that your practice on the yoga mat has a lot to tell you about your nervous system. And this is how, this is why. So, in safe regulated, energy, fascia, and a yogic perspective. In yoga philosophy, energy or prana, it flows through the subtle channels and the centers. The fascial network mirrors this idea in physical anatomical way. So it's mirroring our energetics of the chakras. So fascia forms energetic highways, much like our chakra highway, the up and down movement, right? So fascia forms energetic highways, lines of tension that align with meridians and nadis. Where fascia is restricted, energy flow diminishes. When fascia is open and hydrated, energy and emotion move freely. So
Michelle, when
this
you
is,
mean hydrated, do you mean like water hydration?
yeah,
Okay.
like there's it because we don't want it like stuck and
Sticky.
dry. And, so we need that mobility. And part of it is our hydration. It's our decreased inflammation, because if we have increased inflammation, it's going to hamper the hydrating ability of a spaciousness inside. And so it's all tied in. And this is why students can feel emotional release during slow, mindful, or deep fascial practices. Energy is no longer trapped in the tissue. And I believe, JL, you had mentioned something about, you said something about directing energy and how, what was it like? It's kind of like foo-foo, but just directing your breath into an area, right? And just
Yeah,
working
just
with
directing your
energetic.
breath towards that area that you feel the tightness.
Mhm. So, and the thing is, it's not really. too out there when we explain it in a way that where our attention goes, so where we focus, energy will flow. So wherever our attention goes, that's we can get energy to flow. So when we have something that's diseased or injured, you can be sure that there's not a good circulation. There's not energy flowing through there, right? So it becomes a very, very important because the energetic highways of the fascia, it aligns with meridians and nadis. So those of us who know anything about, Chinese medicine, acupuncture, acupressure. So this is really important. And so somatic and fascia focus yoga, and this is how a release will happen. Somatic yoga supports fascial health and emotional wellness because it emphasizes slow, mindful movement that allows fascia to melt, unwind, and reorganize, right? So is that done by a flow class, right? A fast flowing vinyasa class? No. It needs to be slow and mindful movement that gives it time to melt, unwind, and reorganize. This is why slowing down movement is so important. And those of us who live in anxiety, are go, go, go all the time, we don't want to slow down for these type of practices, right? It's very hard for us to. But pauses that give the nervous system time to shift into safety. So if we're working with the nervous system, it's important to slow it down and to have some pausing for reflection and for the somatic yoga to happen. Also, gentle pressure and long holds will hydrate the fascia. That's how you hydrate it. So
Could you
gentle
repeat
pressure,
that again?
yeah, gentle pressure and long holds hydrate fascia. Interoceptive awareness, feeling the body from the inside out, works with the fascia, and breath work that softens the bracing patterns and signals safety. So these practices create the conditions for softening of the chronic tension patterns, release of stored emotional energy, improved vagal tone, increased breath capacity, and a sense of grounding and embodied presence. So when fascia becomes fluid again, emotional fluidity follows. Okay. Questions on that so far? Okay. So with neuroscience, how fascia connects to emotional patterns. From a brain-based perspective, fascia influences emotional wellness because it is densely innervated by afferent nerves. So remember, we have the afferent and efferent nerve fibers. So it's innervated by afferent signals. So these are signals going to the brain from the body. So I'm not even moving from this point for a second, because do you see how important the posture and the way that we hold our body and the gut health affects what's happening and the brain is responding to? So if our body is being constricted and held in bad posture, it's communicating a sense of stress. Even if you're not stressed, it can communicate a sense of stress to the brain, and the brain will respond in that way of sending out what's needed to get out of that stressful situation. So most of our emotional and physical sensations arise from the body up and not the brain down. This is very important for us to distinction. So now you can see where your place is in healing through emotional wellness, through moving the body. Yoga is not the only way, but it's the doorway in which I'm entering or we are entering. And that's what we're talking about. So restricted fascia limits our interoception, which can reduce emotional clarity and self-awareness. What is that? What did I say? Restricted fascia limits interoception, which can reduce emotional clarity and self-awareness. Can somebody go a little further on that? Sarah, are you here? Yeah.
I am. Yeah. Um, yes, I think that it means that you don't have as much ability to go inward, to have, that like interoception is going inside. You're not clear about who you are, or maybe even what you're projecting. You're not aware, as aware, maybe, is that's kind of the way I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like when we're doing our yoga practices and we're not really tuning into what's happening inside, right? So remember when we talked about that a little bit and we said, yeah, it's cool. Grab your yoga mat, walk into a yoga class and do what you've been doing for 20 plus years. And it could be, it's good for you. It's good for the body, but it could be mindless. Like you're just showing up and just rolling out the mat, but not really present. But yet, when you add this element of presence into your practice where, a teacher is reminding you not just to breathe, but to feel what's happening on internally while you're doing something, that it could change everything for us in an emotional wellness realm. Does that make sense?
Yes. And also, it's like a chain reaction, because if by the time that the fascia is restricted, it's restricted because it's mirroring your nervous system. So, i.e., right, if it's restricted, then you're already activating the sympathetic nervous system. You're already stressed. And we know, because of all the training that you've provided, that when one is stressed and dysregulated, the first thing to go is the executive functioning and the prefrontal cortex. So hence, how are you going to have the introspection? You can't access that, because that's like, you can't even. So it's kind of like, it's just this huge chain reaction.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting, but it's kind of like, which came first, the chicken or the egg,
Yeah. So it's like we don't have to do all of these things, but this is just another doorway where you can make huge difference. And like I said, our capacity might be different for one day or the other. One day we can make a point to eat healthier for ourselves. Another day we can make a point to get more sleep for ourselves. Another day we can make a point to do some type of self-care. But somebody said this earlier, and it's like the small things that begin to add up that can start this process. So it doesn't just pick one little step to move for, because free hydrated fascia improves the brain's ability to map the body. And this is a key part of our healing trauma, because also what I forgot to mention was that, a big thing with trauma, working with trauma, is that they cannot, they've can't be aware of what's happening in the body. There's been some disassociation a lot of times in the body. So it's not always accessible. Somatic yoga is not always accessible to be in the practice. It's not like you failed if you're doing a yoga practice and you're being guided to feel what you feel inside. But knowing that part of trauma is that I might not be able to feel what's going inside, but part of this process of working with yoga and the healing part is to just keep showing up to the yoga class, even and some sort of guidance where it's like, it's okay if you don't feel this. It's not like you're failing at this or you're bad at this. But there's been, that you can mention something, especially if it's in a trauma environment, where sometimes it takes a while to reconnect into this, and just being patient and kind and compassionate with ourselves so that we can have this experience. But understanding that fascia is a major highway of communication, and one of the factors in our emotional wellness is a big it's a big piece of information for this. So this supports what yoga has been telling us for thousands of years, is that when you free the body, you free the mind. When you free the body, you free the mind. So when fascia matters in emotional wellness, is that it's essential to emotional wellness because it reflects our nervous system state. Your physical body is going to reflect for you your emotional state. Give me something that we would see in our physical body that would cue us into our emotional state. It doesn't have to be good or bad. It could be the sympathetic or the parasympathetic nervous system. But what does it look like in our physical body? I'll go first. Eyes darting everywhere. What would that say? You're in a yoga pose and your eyes are darting out everywhere. What is that showing us? The nervous system's a little bit on overwhelm, right? What else? What else?
Stress, panic, angst, anxiety.
What would that look like in the body? The eyes or a different
Yeah. Oh, I
body
was
part?
responding to the eyes darting around. Like that's like panicky. It's yeah, like clenching. That's
Oh.
What about like the chest shut down? Right? And so we're reflecting when you can see it in your body, because there was that question in this training. Is like, how do I know what I don't know? I don't know. And something feels tight or constricted in my physical body. That is something to look at the restriction. Was there an injury? Does that make sense? Oh yeah, I knocked my hip up on or is it there just suddenly this restriction, and I feel like I'm starting to get a little bit depressed or unhappy or whatever. So it's like correlating that. It's like paying attention to what's happening in your physical body will inform you many times of what's happening in the nervous system. So when you ask, how do I know what I don't know? It's like, where's restriction and where's the limitation happening for you that's different from maybe that or whatever. So our fascia also stores both tension and emotion. It connects physical and physiological patterns, and it responds immediately to breath and mindful movement. That's important. So your fascia responds immediately to what?
Breath and mindful movement.
Right? So we know that when there's chronic tension held in the physical body, and we go and we hold poses, it takes at least 2 to 3 minutes to get into the deeper connective tissue, into the fascia. But it takes consistent moving into that place to change and open up a blockage in the fascia, to repattern the fascia. You can't do a restorative yoga pose and work with chronic tightness and tension in the physical body and in one class for the most part, but you're not going to see, because your fascia has patterned into the imbalance, the misalignment. That's the new alignment, connective tissue patterns that the body it thinks is the what it's supposed to do. So even though you open up this blockage, what its job is to put it back to where it's been consistently. Gretchen, I know you want to talk about that. Right? Is that okay would you
Personally, and that's why when you do things like, and I know most of you have done like roller work with me, like when we've been on those foam rollers, which strictly targets fascia, then you know that firstly that there's discomfort, right? There might be some robust sensation in working with your fascia and that kind of pressing. And then there is, after it's all over, there's feeling warmth and color, which equals to me circulation. But, you know, because just even a lateral flexion is going to stretch side body. You take your ear and you pull your ear up, that's pulling fascia all here. So it's like that little ridge in your ear. So when we push our head into our hand and take our elbow back, dig that little ear crease, and then just pull everything, that pulls fascia too. So, I mean, I think it's complicated work, but I always think that it's not hard. It's not hard, but if you think, okay, fascia covers everything, everything has it. It's all interconnected. It's like we have a shrink wrap over us, our muscles, our bones, our nerves, our veins, our everything has fascia on it. There's no part that doesn't have it. So it's like everything that I do that negatively affects. So it's like I always think of it like a bootlace system, you know. So like if I'm tight on the right side, it's going to affect things on the left side in 2 or 3 points. And if I'm tight on the left side, it's going to affect points on the right side. So it's just working with fascia and thinking about how yoga changes our fascia, is just like it's open for you. But like you said, there has to be time under pressure. There has to be time under pressure.
I love
So
that.
like
That's
when
like
we
a
do
formula.
when we
That's
do those,
physics.
yeah, when we do those, like anything that we were on the brick for, anything that we did the brick for, that's time under pressure. And so what Bakir used to say is like anything that's tight or uncomfortable or bunched up fascia wise, if it's on something that's hard, it's forced to release. It can't fight against the firmness of the ground, the brick, the roller, the foam roller. So it's like when we're using bricks at the yoga studio, I'm always like, leave the foam ones, go for the hardest brick you can, because you want that time under pressure. You want it to be firm, and not everybody likes the firmness, but it's the best course of action. I don't know. I love to think about fascia. I love to think about what hydrates it. I think about, especially for women, lateral flexion, anywhere in our neck and upper chest, anything that we can do that's chest openers, silly belt tricks, any of the things that we do, that all affects our fascia. It does. Everything that we do does. Lateral flexion is any twist that has a huge effect. Again, the bootlace system. So it's like if I'm pulling here and I'm bringing my head up, elbows back, this is all affecting here. But if what I'm doing on this side is stretching armpit, chest, armpit, arm. If I'm holding the strap and I'm doing my silly belt tricks, right? And I get to the back plane and my wrists are flexed and I straighten my arms and it pulls into the armpit, chest, right where the arm comes into the torso. That's affecting not only fascia, but lymph. So it's like if we're hydrating fascia, we're hydrating lymph, we're moving lymph. If we're working on our calves, we're working with feet, we point and flex our feet. We pump lymph, that's hydrating fascia too. So it's like what I'm taking away from this lecture is all the multiple ways that we can hydrate fascia. We can hydrate it with lymph, we can hydrate it with water, we can hydrate it with good food, we can hydrate it with blood flow, we can hydrate it with self-love through like any of the beautiful tools that you've taught us all along the way, because the mind affects the body and the body affects the mind. So it's like the word for me out of this lecture so far is hydration. How can I hydrate and not be limited to think 8 glasses of water?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not gonna
yeah.
limit- You're not going to
Oh,
limit yourself to 8 glasses of water.
and so when we're tight, what do we tend to do? We tend to not bother
Or
it,
in pain, tight
leave
or
it
in
alone.
pain.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And so what's the worst thing that you can do is that if you don't address this discomfort, and jail, or somebody said this earlier and they alluded to it, it's uneasiness, dis-ease that becomes a disease. So start anywhere, but start now. But then you understand that there's afferent and efferent fibers, bidirectional communication to the brain, from the brain to the body. And the majority of the communication is coming from the physical body. And much of the communication is located in the fascia. So, what does this equate to in the whole picture of everything? Do you see this connection? That emotional wellness through yoga or healing through movement, moving the body heals the nervous system. You can't think the nervous system well. You can't. You can't read enough self-help books to think yourself well. There has to be prana, energy flow, and it has to have this. So this has to happen to be able to get healthy connections and communication happening. But by understanding the fascia, teachers and as students, even when you're in your yoga practice, making every time you put your foot on the mat count. This could be a deeper experience and a deep healing for you through this emotional, wellness but having compassionate relationship with your body. And, back to where we have maybe disassociated, because there's trauma, and that there could have been things that happened. Some people are disconnected from the entire lower half of their bodies. So it's like, and you're telling them to tuck their tailbone, or you're telling them to some random cue that just isn't gonna, you know what I'm saying? So we're working with this gentle reconnection into physical sensations that are happening or could be happening in a yoga practice, but in a way that's not shameful if it's not. You know what I'm saying? And so you're giving time and space, like we talked about. They've got to have adequate space in the practice to be able to feel if it is or if it's not disconnected even. And consistency. So fascia is the physical structure that holds our emotional stories, basically. It's also the doorway through which we can rewrite them. So through somatic yoga, polyvagal wisdom, breath, and mindful movement, we help the body return back into fluidity, safety, and emotional freedom. So what were the 2 things that I said can change the fascia immediately?
Breath and mindful movement.
That's right. So there can't be any question about what can I do with this now, because you have the information that you need. Now it's how do I apply it? And is it true for me? This is very important for you. If you ever want to share your healing journey, then you got to have some awareness of what's happening when you're working with these techniques to see if it's true for you. And when you find the thing that's working to help you, that's very noteworthy because, our restrictions, our limitations, our injuries, they are our greatest teachers, and these things will help us speak to somebody else who's in a similar situation.
But
So,
don't you think this speaks also too to how we have to practice also, right?
oh, yeah,
It's a complete overhaul of how you think you should practice or what you think practice looks like as a just a yoga practitioner, right? And so like we've said this 100 times, but what makes you an advanced yogini in training is that you can work subtly with your own body. And so that takes time. It takes enough time to return. So what I hear from this is like, what are the ways that I can reconfigure how I practice for myself so that when I go out into the world and teach, then I'm teaching something that has depth and weight, because that's what changes people. Practice of depth and weight. And some days you just go in there and maybe you have your breathe and move, and there's nothing wrong with that either.
right.
I don't want to should on anybody, but I think if we're only teaching what we know, then we have to up level what we know, and to set aside what I think I know for an open mind and a new experience of how to hydrate fascia, for Pete's sakes. One more thing, there's no glass ceiling.
None. So that part I feel like ties all the emotional wellness into that's hard in 50 hours is to get this concept nailed down and kind of put into a bundle. And it's not it. There's way more. There's always more. But I feel like that kind of gives you the somewhere to start. How about we'll say that? This is a starting point in it. We're going to take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back. And I have to. This is the final lecture of all of this, really, and it's a little bit of ethics and whatnot. So you'll get the teaching forward. You should have something about that. It's just something I feel has to be covered at this point, and then we'll close with any questions. And so this is. I'm telling you, this is your only opportunity if you have to clarify anything that is in your notebook. This is the time to do it now after our next lecture. So please make sure that you looked at your notebook, you know what is contained in it, because you need to know how to reference it in later times, okay? So 10 minutes, that'll be 2:15. I'll be right back. All right, so the very final lecture of your 50-hour training is called Teaching Forward, Application and Ethics. So this is very, very important in understanding what our ethical part is in teaching this emotional wellness through yoga. So ethics is it's important in any of the yoga practices because we are really asking people to go deep within themselves, and sometimes it's a very personal experience of what's happening for them. There has to be a sense of safety, and when we have our ethics in check, they can have a safe place for this exploring of what's this healing process. So ethics is how regulated you remain when someone else's nervous system is dysregulated. That's one of the big things for a teacher. That most ethical violations in yoga do not come from bad intentions. They come from state shifts. So anywhere that there might be urgency, over-identification, fear of not helping, or an unexamined authority. So today, when we talk about teaching forward, we're asking that, or I'm mentioning this because teaching in a way that protects the students, that also protects you. And it will protect the integrity of this field. So this is where advanced work becomes professional work. So the scope of the practice, the core principle of this is that you're trained to support regulation, awareness, and choice through yoga practices. You are not trained to treat, diagnose, interpret, or resolve trauma. The scope of what is within our scope. So you, after this training, can responsibly teach to breath practices for regulation, movement for sensation tracking and agency, language that normalizes nervous system responses, practices that support safety, grounding, and integration, and education about the nervous system without personalization. And creating a space for reflection without interpretation. You can say things like, notice what is happening in your body. You're welcome to choose what feels supportive for you. Or even, that's a common nervous system response. That normalizes this. But what you should not do or say is diagnose trauma, PTSD, anxiety, or depression. Not interpret emotional content. Well, like this means this, this, this. Invite not to set releasing as the goal of the practice. Does that mean, right? That process personal trauma stories in class. Like, that's not your platform to process your own personal trauma in these type of classes. You can use things like examples, like our teachers are very good at using where they would tell you a little bit of a story as more of an example that invites something else to come up for them, but not to take the place for them to worry about you, right? And process, and also not to position yourself as a healer, a fixer, or guide through someone's history, so we have to really realize, many of us have professions outside of your yoga teaching. So then if you combine whatever the scope of what you have been doing with this, powerful, right? But just not to represent yourself in a way that there's no professional training to back that up. So if the work moves from regulation to resolution, then you may be outside of your scope. So we have to know when to refer people out. So language is an intervention. So every word you use sends signals of safety or threat. Every word you use sends permission or pressure. Every word you use invites agency or compliance. So we have to pick our words carefully, especially when we're working with trauma-informed. But that, I would say, would be a whole other training in itself, to spend some time learning about more in detail on this. But advanced teaching is not about sounding profound, it's about being accurate. So you want to invite agency over performance, and we've already talked about that. But just knowing your scope of what you are trained to do, and when somebody is wanting to share personal stories with you, there's got to be some boundaries in that, because then it becomes feels like a therapy session for them, and you are not qualified. You know what I mean? I don't know if you personally, but I would think that the majority, I'm not qualified to hear all the details of the story and then make suggestions from there, because I'm not the therapist that's working within that. I am just there to guide the physical body into opening up so energy can flow. And then when things come up, they can then seek counseling from counselors. So in your notebooks, you were given, in even in Corpus Christi or different areas that we have people doing this trainings, but you were given resources that you could give 1-800 numbers out, or numbers out to people to seek help, because it's good to have those resources. But always remembering that when we're working with trauma, to use invitational, not direct, not forceful language, to name sensations that they might expect, but not meanings in that, and working with their choice, that they have choice in the matter, but still have your boundaries of, we work with alignment, but there's some space in between that when we're working with emotional health, to avoid promises of healing, avoid that this is going to heal you, but it's like, yeah, I think that is some of the biggest important parts of it, and that one of the biggest skills that you will have to develop is restraint, because we want to help and we want to make people feel better, but there it could be a tricky slope in some of these things. So when you should not get involved any further in with a student is if I don't even know how to say that. But any signs of spiraling that we've talked about, any signs of acute distress, things like that, they just really need to be sent. I think that this is almost common sense, but not. So just remember your place in this. And what we are really doing is opening the physical body for energy to move, working within, we understand, where in the body do you feel this? What yoga poses would work for that? And you can say, this has helped me feel better. You can say things like that, but always give them agency to decide for themselves if it helps them feel better. So referral or containment is needed, especially when they have disassociation or loss of orientation, if they begin to have flashbacks or time confusion, if there's a panic that doesn't resolve with grounding, if there's a disclosure of abuse, self-harm, or crisis, if there's repeated emotional flooding, and your role is not to handle that alone. And the most ethical response you could have is, this is beyond what I can support here, and I want to help you find the right care. And that's where you have your resources. So when you refer out, that's an active
What
intake.
does emotional flooding mean, Michelle? What does that mean?
They
Like
just cannot,
crying?
they just cannot get a hold of their emotions. It's just everything is coming up. You know what you've seen
Yeah.
that. What was that girl you said you had like
Screaming
screaming
lady.
in class and the things
Okay.
like that?
She
Just
wasn't in
like
class, she was private, but still, yeah, she
private.
screamed for an hour 15, yeah.
Yeah. And so that would be, where it's like, do you have a therapist? I really want to know if you have a therapist, because, it's like, I don't want to have my 1 hour with them and send them out like that. Because then that could be a problem, right?
So that was going to be my question, is like, how do you feel comfortable letting someone walk out of your class if you know they're not okay?
Yeah, so that is where I would be writing down phone numbers, the 1-800s or whatnot, local number for them to call, or calling the number for them while they're with you before they leave. That's your ethical. That would be. And it was like this one time I had this guy, and this is not emotional, but I had a client fall, and he was obviously very weak. It was after a private session, very weak, and something was going on medically for him. And his session was over. He wanted to go. He was stubborn. And I had to put my foot down, and I couldn't. And I had another appointment I needed to get to too. So I'm like, but I had to put my foot down no matter what, because he was in my responsibility, my care, and I wasn't leaving till an ambulance came and checked him out. Then it was between them. So it's like, I feel like if I make that call on their phone or my phone and hand them the phone, then ethically, you're handing it over to the professional. I think that that's as far as like we could really go and be okay. Does that make sense? Yeah. I mean, that's a tricky one. But when we do send somebody out, that is an act of integrity. And that's honoring the student's nervous system. That's honoring them. And it's respecting our limits. And it's strengthening our credibility as a profession. Because this right here hasn't even begun in the yoga world yet. You are among some of the first, I feel, in this. I don't know of a system that puts this all together in this exact package. But you can bet that this is going to be happening, and yoga teachers are going to venture into this. And we all know that ethics weren't part of a lot of teacher trainings. So having information taught that uncovers such a tender place in people can be scary. It can be very, very scary if there's not the ethical side of this, right? So you never have to apologize for staying within your scope of and continue to do your own nervous system development, because you can't teach regulation sustainably without practicing it off the mat yourselves. So it is your duty that if you want to teach into this, in this, that you continue to do the work with yourself. It's never done. It's constant studying and working with things as they come up on the daily. So the way that you would personally work with this for yourself is personal somatic practices, intentional somatic practices, consulting with therapists and working, combining something with them. What do you think about this? This program was developed in that way, that like, well, what do you think about this? Is this, is this appropriate and not appropriate? So, a lot of checking in with that. Regular reflection on our boundaries and honest assessment of burnout signals for ourselves. So you can ask yourself on the regular, am I teaching from presence or pressure? That happens with yoga too. Am I resourcing myself as much as I need to resource as I'm resourcing others? Like, are you continuing to work with learning for yourself? And yeah, So just be careful with burnout. Integrity is alignment between what you know, what you teach, and what you live. These are the words to take with you. Integrity is alignment between what you know, what you teach, and what you live. And signs that you're teaching with integrity are that you leave class in a regulated, not depleted state, that you are clear about your role, you are comfortable saying no, you trust students' capacity, and that you don't need to be essential. You don't need to be essential to be valuable. And that you're not here to be indispensable, but you're here to be reliable. So any good sign of a good therapist or a good, something that is really working for the benefit of others is that you're not needed. We work to give it back to you and have agency in your choices. That if you are working with me one-on-one and you become dependent on me, then I'm not doing something that I'm supposed to be doing. Does that make sense? It's getting them on their own quickly. It doesn't mean I wouldn't have clients for years, but they don't need me to feel okay. They could actually do a yoga practice on their own, and it would be a good practice. So that's all I got to say about that, I think. Is there any questions? Any thoughts, concerns? Okay. I'm going to open up the rest of the floor for this is any content of this training. Can I clarify anything at this time?
I have one set of notes. Oh, and by the way, this was awesome. Thank you. That was
Which part?
what you just did, what you just said, the
Oh,
teaching.
okay.
I really enjoyed that. It was just, you said so much, I have no questions because it was so perfect. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
yes, thank you. I have this. It says thematic yoga lecture note and key concepts. And I guess I just didn't write anything down. If I could just have the answer.
Yeah. So does anybody have that where it's filled out just out of curiosity? I'll pull it up.
Okay.
I'm going to pause this for a second. Okay, so yay, we finished all the material. Is there anything else I can clarify? No. Yes, no? Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I had this question after I meant to ask it right after the ethics that we just covered. So like, how do you, how does one still have, well, I don't know how to ask this. Like, how do you still have boundaries, but yet also sometimes can be friends with your students?
That's a tough one. And then that's a good question because through emotional wellness, when I'm offering this and, just through teaching, I make a lot of amazing friends. But when somebody's come to me as a yoga teacher, first and foremost, I have to keep a little bit of a boundary that separates out teacher friend because I want to still be helpful and useful in their lives in the way of a yoga teacher. So doesn't mean I'm not friendly or have personality, but it's highly unlikely that, well, you've seen it. You actually, you came to me in yoga. We became friends. I mean, dear friends, right? but you did a yoga teacher training with me. And during our breaks, I didn't go hang out with y'all. Did you notice that?
Yes.
Things like those are the things that I did, not because I didn't want to, but I had to keep, that's the only way I know how to keep my boundaries, that there's some boundary. That I might be sad and have personal problems, but I can share some of it, but I'm not going to come to you first in my life in that way, because I want to protect the integrity of our relationship. And it's not meant in a cold way. And I always welcome warm text and, messages and things like that. But I do have those very distinct boundaries. If you look back, it's not, hopefully it wasn't obvious during all of this, but when you look back upon it, you can see moments where it was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like, when class is over, I have to end class. I can hang out and I chat and I'm there a little bit before, a little bit after, but I have to go afterward because I have to have these clear boundaries of closing it down.
Mhm.
It's been hard and difficult, but once I cross that boundary with somebody and they become in that other circle, I'm not their yoga teacher anymore.
Okay.
And I am very clear on that with myself.
Okay.
That I can't be that yoga teacher for them anymore.
Okay.
So,
That was my question, because well, this is unique, this is a unique experience, but I only taught for less than 2 years. So that wasn't anything that came up for me. But if I'm going to start teaching again, because I do remember setting boundaries before class, after class. And I wasn't I was friendly, but there wasn't any the relationship that you and I have. And so I was asking mainly because you've been doing it, you have so much experience, and how did you counter that, or how did you
yeah, there's been subtle little stops along the way, but at the same time, it's warm and close. But I think it's more of me dumping myself onto you is where the boundary gets crossed for me, and then I am no longer able to do that. And I just feel like there's so much love in a teacher student. And I learned this gracefully through Manorma. So gracefully through her, because there was, time when we were extremely close, enough to text all the time and talk, quite often, and knew the family and all of that. But she was so graceful at having the boundaries, and and as student I crossed those boundaries many a times, but she was so gentle in setting it straight, because she was my teacher. She's my teacher. She's my guru and always will be. So it was I was just lucky enough to have good teachers who taught in that way. Yeah.
I think too, if for me, I'm a student and I've gone to Michelle at times and said, I'm going through this and I need yoga to do this for me. I need to get out of this. And she's graceful and she's like, I think you would be a really good fit for this. Or keep coming back. I've gone to Gretchen and said, I need yoga to do this. Could you offer some privates to get there? And she's, with grace, said yes and did it. And I think those are healthy boundaries. And yeah, we all overshare sometimes, but that's where it could be if you know to tell a student, well, just keep coming back, but then don't be their dumping ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're your friend, I mean, but we have to have boundaries like that with all of our friends.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to be someone's dumping ground. So you do have to have boundaries mean, I'm sure that we're all that for somebody, but I think that's all
Yeah.
right. Like
And
maybe
the
your
moment,
job is done for your daughter and your husband and your mom, but then you have to allow space. I don't know
well,
if I've had that right, but
yeah, no, that's perfect. And JL has and I have probably a pretty good example of this, and we hadn't talked about this publicly. I hope it's okay. Are we okay to talk about this for a second? Do you remember when you were teaching at the studio and our precious um, student Amber?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, do you remember that? You and I as
Yeah.
teacher to student to have talked about this, and that's when that was, yeah, go ahead, JL.
It was just hard to deal with because it took away from everybody else in class. And trying to set those boundaries, it's like, yes, I'll be your friend, but I I can't fix you. I didn't say those words to her, and that's where I had to come ask Michelle, what do I do?
And how long were you held up? And thank God for those precious times. She's no longer with us, right? So it's a very sad situation, but at the same time, JL was early to class, and she was sometimes hours after class with that student in the studio. And that's when I saw that there was a little bit of a, be careful, JL, because this is the boundary blurring, right? And it's a slippery slope when you go into that. And I would say that y'all became more friends than teacher student at a certain point, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay to do that. But it was just, there's a
Draining.
definite jump over.
It was draining, and it made me like hope that she wasn't going to be in next week's class because it just sucked everything out of me. That was tough. But
JL is, wants to help everybody. She'll do anything like, she said, but then she got her energy was depleted, and she was dealing with her own stuff at the time. So it was really, so that's what I'm saying, is just that you'll have to have clear, and this is great for you to clear class times. It starts now, finishes now. And so you have to have this, I've got to be somewhere else in 20 minutes. I've had students help me clean up and whatnot. But then if they're staying like an hour or two afterward and having these conversations, that's a private session. And then that's crossed my boundaries again, where my time isn't worth something, and I have this situation out here where I live now with limited students, but trying to get close and inviting me over and things like that. And I know I can't do that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's one of the hardest things to navigate as a yoga teacher, and boundaries. But it's really, really important that I never, never cross that line. Otherwise, this person who's benefiting so much from, what we have to offer won't have that resource available. And, she's been the first one to say how much she's benefit and all the ways how. So I do it more for them. Right. Well, good questions. And Gretchen, I know you've got your
I
thoughts
don't
on.
think I would have said anything different than what you already said. It's just
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
these relationships that I've met and had in yoga classrooms are precious and dear.
Mm,
And I never had an Amber like that would hold me hostage for a long period of time. Um, doesn't mean that I won't in the future, but and I've done some things right and I've done some things wrong too, And I mean, it's 32 years I've been in a relationship with this practice. So I don't have an expectation of myself that I'm always going to stick the landing, that I'm always going to never overshare, that I'm always going to do the right thing in every situation. I think um, part of being human is that you sometimes make mistakes and you have to turn around and come back. But majority of my students have, they already have good boundaries. And sometimes I learn boundaries from them.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to set firm boundaries. And um, it may not sound like yoga-y, but safety is important to me. And if I feel like something's unsafe, I'm going to say something. I don't know. I like I said, I've done some things really right and I've done some things really wrong. And that's just the nature
Mhm.
of human. And you learn, like by getting trapped by a pranic vampire, you learn. You
Well,
get cornered.
yeah, it was beyond our scope anyway. You
Mhm.
know,
Oh
it was
yeah,
so,
she was trouble for
and the
sure.
thing is, not that it was trouble, but it was dangerous for them because you know, the guilt that we feel when we lost her to, I believe it was suicide. So the guilt would have been too much for me to bear if I was the last person that she talked to and I didn't have the right places, if I hadn't sent her out for professional, you know?
But
So it's like that.
we don't
It's
control people's actions.
no, but we
It's
have
so
to
hard. It's
protect
such a
ourselves.
slippery slope. But love people. I always say love people and keep it light. Keep humor forward. Humor forward. Like just keep it light, keep it funny, try to keep connection. Know people's names. Learn their
Yeah.
names. If you just know their name and you greet them by their name, that's going to be a good connection. And just it comes back to just love people, keep it humorous, do your best, realize you're going to make mistakes. And if you do, you might have to turn around and go back and apologize or make an amend. And that's okay too. Because look, and I'm not talking about a situation that's complicated like Amber. I'm just talking about John Q. Public that comes in off the street. You knowing their name and remembering their name, that means a lot. Or you just, giving somebody a pat on the back when they're leaving and saying, yeah, keep showing up. Or I mean,
I had
I
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry.
I'm done.
Go ahead. No, please. Please.
I feel like I've said it. Now I'm just repeating myself. Just know their name, make them happy, try to make them smile. A
Mhm.
joke, a lame joke all the time that's the same one, that they get to know your silly jokes and terms like scoochie and keep it light. I mean, sometimes life is so heavy that we don't need to add more weight. We can just like I make mistakes and I do the left side once and I don't do the other side. And then I give Sarah a hard time for not telling me I didn't do the right side. So I mean, part of authenticity equals I fuck up sometimes. Part of being authentic is I get angry sometimes. Part of being authentic is that I have to apologize sometimes. Part of being authentic is I sometimes say the right thing. Sometimes, not all the time, but really and truly, like Michelle says, there is there's nothing that I can do to fix you. I can be a loving catalyst and sometimes a mirror and sometimes um, a friend, but I mean, just brave and undefended. That's the best thing. Like just put that somewhere, write it down somewhere. Make sure that you show up brave and undefended because what happens when I come in defended, and believe me, I got some defenses. I got walls that are thick, and it's taken so many years and so much money to even get a crack of light in those defenses. But by God's grace, man, I just keep fucking showing up. brave and undefended. It's messy sometimes. It's clunky sometimes. I got to go back and say, I'm sorry. I got to go back and make an amends. I sometimes people come to me and say, do you remember that thing you said back in Nam? No, I do not. But tell me, what did I say? I mean, was it good or bad? I don't know. Now the woman off the ground by her feet where her arms didn't touch. Let's put Miss O'Connor back down in the headstand. I mean, I have made so many mistakes, but we learn from our mistakes. So I think when it comes to ethics, when we talk about ethics, even though this is due diligence of this program, Michelle has to talk to us about this. It's due diligence. I don't want you to be afraid. I don't want this to, hey, ho, shut up. See, the little one. You're barking at the biggest dog in the group. Hey, don't do that. So but don't let it hold you back. Don't let it hold you back. It's situational. Ethical issues that come up are situational, and you're smart women. You're going to know exactly how to handle the situation that comes up, or you'll just say, I think we need to bring in, like I tell people, I may not have the answers, but I know people that have the answers and we can call them.
Mhm.
So just love yourself. Don't let ethical conversations put you in a tailspin, right? Because I've had people come up to me and it's like, oh man, this is so much. I just don't think and I had it too. I was like, Michelle, what if somebody freaks out? What if somebody says this? What if somebody does that? Although if I live in the what ifs, I'm never going to do it. I'm not going to live in the what ifs around this. I'm just going to know that through divine download, I'm going to have the right answer or the wrong answer, and we'll go from here. But just humor and lightness, and know people's names, and bring new people in and let them know that they're welcome. Introduce others in the class to them. Hi, this is Sarah, and this is JL, and this is Gwenny, and over there's Kitty, and she loves to be in this spot all the time. So if you come early, or you like the person that comes in late, hey, you come in late, well, everybody's going to stare at you, and then we all just like, you know what I mean? Just anything to get them out of here and into here, the lower 48 states. And that the humor is not everybody's way, but it's my way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Good point. Thank you. Yeah, it's that the boundaries can be in that way with this. And like I had clients that would invite me to lunch and stuff, and I wanted to be friends in that way, but I just always had to politely decline, just simply because that's just what I felt. So we each have our own way of handling it, but that's kept the lines really clear for me, and you know, but it's nothing to. I hope that answered, and I hope that wasn't nobody was offended in that
No,
on
it's
that.
like such an important conversation, Michelle. We have to have that, right? And
We
so
do.
we have to, like people ask me to lunch and stuff like that. It's very few people that I will like do that with. There's very few people that are like that to me. And I think about how long it took me to be Christina's friend. God,
Well,
took a
Christina was one of our good, amazing
long,
teachers that had
long time.
excellent boundaries.
Oh,
She would
she is
stay
a
at my
person.
house when she would come, and my kids, I remember my kids still don't like her from this, but she would come to the house and she would immediately come home after training and dart upstairs. And literally, her food would be delivered to her up there. We did not see her. So she didn't socialize or anything else. And I get that because I didn't get it then. I was just like, come on, But she was exhausted. She was conserving her energy. She had a job to teach. And then when I was traveling back and forth, that's kind of how I felt. It's like I just needed to isolate and nothing after, because you go from all these hours and all the prep in between beforehand. So you could see, you'll see, but man, we've had some good teachers that really showed us what it looked like to be, that there's a lot of love there between us, but there's also they're a teacher and you're the student.
But all of y'all have good manners. All of y'all had good, and you have good
And
manners, right?
it wasn't about manners. It's just
Well,
like you
with
just like you
Christina,
feel
it's
close.
it's just
You
for
feel
her, it was
close.
prana retention. Like you're saying, she needs to save her prana.
Well, and
But
especially in this emotional health, you're going to feel super close to people. This is opening up tender, and you get to have these amazing conversations, and there's a closeness there, and that's where it gets blurry. It's a little different than just the plain asana classes. These are deeper workings and more time spent with somebody, so it gets very blurry. But having those examples of my teachers really helped. And so we pass that to you in that way to choose however you want to handle it. But, it will get blurry and it's going to get messy in this way. So, yeah. Okay. Any other conversations? I know you've got to pee, right? You want to pee and you want to get your certificate? You want to take a group photo? I think so. Okay. It's 3:12. How about 10 minutes? Get back. And if you don't mind, if you got your mail, bring your certificate with you. Go put a little lip gloss on or whatever. Brush your hair. And then we'll talk a little bit and then I'll be right back. 10 minutes.